Namaskar. The farmers' protest in India is now close to completing 3 months, and there are still no signs of any amicable solution. In the last video, we took a look at the first of the three bills which are at the center of all this controversy, the APMC bill. If you have not seen that video and would like to do so, I'll put a link in the description below. In this video, let us have a look at the second and third bills. The second bill is what we all call the hoarding bill, uh, in a way because it seems to allow us to hoard agricultural commodities. The actual name of the bill is Amendment to the Essential Commodities Act. Now, what is the Essential Commodities Act? It allows two main things. The first thing is that it allows the government to regulate how much of stock holding you can keep of essential commodities, and food stuff being one of the most primary essential commodities. So this is to prevent, for instance, say there is enough produce of potatoes and onions, enough for all of us, but some of us hoard and keep in our warehouses enough for say 25% of the population. Then there is an acute shortage, and the prices shoot up. And when the prices shoot up, the hoarder, the trader, or the businessman, whatever we want to call him, he then releases the hoarded goods at a gradual pace, to keep an artificially inflated price. We all have seen and faced this in the market. So that is one power that this Essential Commodities Act gives the government, that it can regulate the amount of foodstuff that can be held in stock by any trader. The second thing that this act confers on the government is the authority to put a temporary ban on exports. Now, if the availability of a certain foodstuff, say of tur dal, is extremely low in the country, but some exporters are exporting tur dal, then the government, in for the benefit of society, can put an order banning the export of tur dal for a certain period of time. Now, what does this bill do, which the government has brought in? It removes both of those powers which are vested in the government. It says that in effect, it allows any trader, any businessman, any warehouse owner to stock as much foodstuff as he wants. They have put a rider, though. They have said in this bill that this condition can be checked again, but only in dire circumstances. If, for instance, there is a huge national calamity, if there are floods, and if there is an earthquake, if there are or war and all such extreme calamities, only in that case can the government and should the government interfere in how much foodstuff can be stocked by the trader. The other part is about the exports. Even here, the government has announced that it does not want to ban the export of foodstuff. Let the free market have its play, and let whichever trader or whichever businessman wants to get into agricultural exports, let him do it. These are the two stated objectives. Now, is this right? Is this wrong? That is one way to look at it. What do you think? Should any society have some powers of regulation in the interests of society, so that there is an even distribution of essential commodities? That is a decision for us to take. But in this case, I would like to go a step further and reveal the confusing state of mind of our present government. For instance, the amendment to this act was actually passed in the form of an ordinance in June itself, and it was in effect, in play, when the government introduced the bill in Parliament in September. Now, in September, the prices of onions started to go up a little bit. Not too much, but it was at a ridiculously low price of 10 to 15 rupees a kilo, which then went up gradually to 25 to 35 rupees a kilo. The government in September was arguing in Parliament why these amendments were necessary, why they were useful, why they were good for the nation. And at the same time, the same government's agriculture and commerce departments, they put a ban on export of onions, suddenly, overnight, on the night of September 14th. Now suddenly the farmers who were growing onions, who were beginning to get a decent price, they were angered. They told the government, you told us that you were giving us a gift. You know, when you said you will not ban exports, because when the prices are very low here, there are some importers who are paying higher price. I mean, let us avail of that and earn some more income. And secondly, the government did another thing. A month later in October, when these bills were passed, they were rammed through parliament, they had become acts of this land, legal laws of this land. Again, the government in mid-October imposed stock holding limits on onions. This is very confusing, isn't it? The left hand of the government says, we are amending the law, we have amended the law to ban exports and to allow limitless holding of stock. And the right hand of government, which is the administrative hand, goes ahead and imposes a ban on exports and also imposes a ban on stock holding. This is something that on which questions have been raised, but unfortunately, the government or its spokespersons have not come out with any credible, logical, clear, and believable answer as to why this has happened. The third bill is a very important one. This one we all call the corporate bill, but its legal name is a little longer. The legal name is the Farmers Empowerment and Protection Agreement on Price Assurance and Farm Services Bill 2020. This bill, the details of which we are going to briefly discuss here, when seen in combination with the APMC bill, which we discussed in the last video, they together reveal to us what is the exact plan about agriculture and corporatization that the government has in mind. Now, what this corporate bill does is this. It puts in place a legal framework. The government is authorizing a legal framework in which corporations, any private body, can come and directly negotiate with farmers, sign agreements for on price and produce, and guarantee to pick up the harvested produce of the farmer. At the surface level, which is where the government's arguments are, they always seem to be at the surface level. They're saying, okay, what's wrong? You know, here is a very wonderful rich corporation. He's coming to you and he's assuring you that he will buy your goods at a predetermined price. And even if the price at that time when the harvest is done, even if the price is lower, he will agree to pay that pre-agreed price. So what is wrong? But that is only at the surface level. When one goes a little deeper, and one has to go deeper to understand this picture, we are not just talking about the validity of agreements, you know, the enabling of agreements. We are talking about the way that agriculture is done itself. We are talking about self-employment. We are talking about actually Atmanirbharta of the farmer, and whether this bill will help him to remain Atmanirbhar as our Prime Minister wants him to be, or it will actually make millions of our farmers forced to give up their land, give up their self-employed livelihood, and actually become laborers slash employees of the larger or slash unemployed, you know, in society. The reality is that when contracts are made by very large, very rich, and very profiteering companies with very poor, very small farmers, then who holds the power in that agreement? Who holds the upper hand? That is very clear. And it is not without evidence also. There have been contractual farming agreements in Punjab, in Kerala, of which I am aware, and both have turned very, very sour for the farmers. One can have a look at it. You know, Pepsi has had agreements in Punjab for tomato and potatoes, and in Kerala recently, multinational corporations have had agreements for vanilla farming. We can do our research and see whether that has helped the farmers or not. Specifically, this bill has some portions which are highly objectionable to the farmers. One is that it says that in case of disputes, and disputes are bound to arise in agreements, it says that in case of disputes, the farmers cannot go to the courts. They cannot avail of our judicial process. and that is quite surprising. The whole plank of justice in our constitution rests, on the judicial process, however imperfect it may be. But to remove that is a very strange decision indeed. The bill provides for disputes to be addressed by the quasi-judicial authority invested in the administration, which means that if I, as a farmer, I am an organic farmer here, in Maharashtra. If I have a dispute, I'm perforce I have to go to the Tehsildar or any other officer appointed by the government, and I cannot take my matter to to the independence of the courts. So no one would protest the intention of the government if it went for something holistic, something that it could explain very well to everybody as to what its vision is. Presently, the vision of the government can be seen. I'm saying can be seen because it is not saying so in words. It can be seen if you combine the APMC bill along with the corporate bill. The core of what the government is trying to do is clear in this. They want us to move away from traditional small farmer based but small farmer owned based agriculture to what is called agro industry, where large corporate players enter the field of agriculture, and all our small farmers who are actually self-employed, and which is so good for our society, they will be thrown out or forced out to become either employees and laborers, or they will just join the ranks of the unemployed. What is agro-industry is something it's very important to understand. And I think we have to look at this in depth because it has been done in other parts of the world. What the Western nations in particular have done on industrial farming, which is called also agro industry, we will see in another video. I'm sure that will be of interest to all of us. In this particular case, one feels that the government has not come out clearly with a picture, and it does not come out honestly with what it really desires. Maybe it felt that if it used the right words to honestly express its intentions, maybe there would be a little more uproar. I do not know. Or maybe it did not use clear words because it is not clear. So I think we have to look at all this, and we have to look at it in a very clear manner for our understanding, without just saying being anti this party or anti that party or pro this government or that, or left or right. There's nothing to do with left, right and center. It has to do with human beings, with human society, with human communities, and we all have to do well, and there has to be justice for all. That is in summation what the expectation of the farmers protesting there is, I feel. There is a lot of talk about rediscovering the beauty, the splendor of Hindustan, the way it used to be. And in that context, the word Hindu and the word Hindutva have also been used. And one feels that if one has to understand, in depth, what that glory and what that splendor of Indian civilization stood for, and if one then looks at these two bills and does, a comparison, I think it's worth doing that. Do these two bills and what they try to bring about, the change in society, is that in tune with the splendor of what Hindustan used to be? That is also something worth looking at.